Our top story this hour, DA leader John Steenhuisen has described the ousting of Mpho Phalatse as Joburg mayor as maximum treachery and has taken a swipe at Action SA for not being democratic. That's as the DA's relationship with its coalition partners has soured, and it now appears to have isolated Mpho Phalatse. The DA leader was speaking at the party's Free State conference. That's in Kroonstad. That's where we also find Govan Whittles, who's been watching that story. And Govan, you've listened closely to Steenhuisen, who's obviously had to respond to the latest developments in Johannesburg.
Yes, we listened to that speech, quite descriptive in the analysis of what happened in the city of Johannesburg this week. There's a lot to unpack. The DA leader, John Steenhuisen, is with us. He's agreed to this interview. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Steenhuisen. Let's begin with the city of Johannesburg. It was expected after the warnings were given out by Action SA, but what did you make of the essential collapse of negotiations in the coalition?
Well, it wasn't necessarily a collapse of the negotiations. It was clearly a refusal to succumb to the extortionate demands of the Patriotic Alliance, who were playing various parties in the council off each other, and to try and secure the best deal where they'd be able to extract as much as they could for their party out of that particular deal. We made it very clear we want to be in government, but not at all costs, and not in a way in which we compromise the city of Johannesburg and its residents by handing over key departments to people who have a track record of extortion and extraction in those particular portfolios. It's a pity that Action South Africa didn't stand with the rest of the coalition on the first ballot with Mpho Phalatse and chose to go it alone, but that was their choice, and we now have a situation where we've lost the city, but we will continue to do what we do as an effective opposition. And we've seen Nelson Mandela Bay, the coalition of corruption, didn't last long there, and the DA was able to make its way back into government there under Mayor Retief Oudendal. And so we'll keep doing what we do best, is holding that government accountable.
Let's get into the assertion that you weren't willing to give the economic development and infrastructure portfolios to the Patriotic Alliance. So was this about making sure the PA doesn't get those two portfolios, or would you have been willing to give the mayorship to Action SA and let them decide who gets the portfolio?
Well, no, because there was never a possibility that Action SA would be the mayor. They're not the biggest party amongst the coalition partners. But it was around, initially the point was that we argued that the PA should not come back into government in a better position than they were when they betrayed the original government and saw the removal of our Speaker and of Mayor Phalatse, despite the fact that they had a written coalition agreement with us. And so we said that they must first show some element of good faith and trust. We then went back and said they can have two positions in the MACO, but they could not have the economic development portfolio. Our suggestion was the Freedom Front took the portfolio of economic development, and that the health portfolio was then given with transport to the Patriotic Alliance. They obviously rejected that and have refused throughout the negotiation to make a single compromise.
Why couldn't you give them the economic development and infrastructure portfolios? Because
they've got a track record in that particular department. When they were in coalition with the ANC the first time, there was a number of elements there we uncovered of wrongdoing, of contracts being cancelled and opportunities for tender fraud and that taking place there. But we were very concerned particularly about the Joburg Property Company, which is located there, and the market, as well as the broadband facilitation there, where moves had already been made to try and cancel the contracts. We just felt we could not be good stewards of the voters of Johannesburg if we simply handed over that portfolio back to the Patriotic Alliance, given their track record there and given their stated intentions. Gayton's always been very clear. He's not into values and principles. He's about deals and about what he can secure as a deal.
Finally, on this point, it sounds like you're saying that the PA can't be trusted with the city's finances or its infrastructure department because you suspect that they can't govern it properly, or do you suspect them of being corrupt?
Well, I think that we can only go on our past experience with the Patriotic Alliance, and unlike some of the other coalition partners, we've had experience in places like Knysna, where, for instance, we've just had to take them to court to reverse unlawful appointments that they had made there, completely outside of the law, to put their own cadres into the municipality. Luckily, we were successful in Knysna, and the court has agreed with us and made the appointments unlawful. But that is the type of behaviour that we've come to expect from the Patriotic Alliance, and which would no doubt have unfolded within the city of Johannesburg, and we were quite clear, not in our name will that sort of thing happen.
To be fair, they had said that they exposed corruption when they were given the stewardship of that department the previous time. Your relationship with them certainly does seem to have hit rock bottom, and it seems to have hit rock bottom with Action SA too. Action SA is a signatory to that formal coalition agreement. Does that change things?
Well, there's no agreement now in Johannesburg. There is no longer a coalition government. However, I would say that it has been disappointing to note the back-channeling, the bad faith back-channeling that had been occurring during the negotiations between Action South Africa and the Patriotic Alliance, and the formation by Action South Africa of what they call the ad hoc group within the coalition, was basically the other parties to try and get them to gang up on the DA. We believe if coalitions are to work, you've got to go into them with good faith and in a real element of partnership. It's very clear that Action South Africa are not invested in DA mayors succeeding or those city administrations succeeding.
What's wrong with parties talking to each other outside of talking to the DA?
Well, it's one thing to have a coalition negotiating. At the same time, you're busy back-channeling that particular coalition talks to the very people that you're trying to strike the negotiation up with. I think that's bad faith.
Well, it does look like the coalition has hit a big snag here. Not clear how it's going to move forward. In the context of the mayorship in Johannesburg, the mayor, Mpho Phalatse, had been accused of working with Action SA on a lot of issues, and it is reported or rumored that she's fallen out of favor with the DA leadership, who are not happy that she has been speaking to Action SA so much and listening to their councillors. What do you think?
Well, that's a complete fallacy being peddled by Action South Africa. The mayor had the full confidence of the Democratic Alliance. We would not have spent the hundreds of thousands it cost us to go to court to get her reinstated as a mayor if she didn't enjoy the confidence. This is a wedge-driving exercise by Action South Africa. You're trying to drive a wedge between the DA mayor, Mpho Phalatse, and the DA. I was very clear at the caucus meeting, the day of the council meeting. Our caucus will go out and instruct them to vote for Mpho Phalatse as the mayor. That's not the behavior of somebody who doesn't have the confidence in that particular mayor. Our party went in and voted for that mayor. Action South Africa voted for their own mayor. We backed Mpho Phalatse to the hilt in that vote. It was Action South Africa that broke the coalition and went and put up their own candidate.
Mpho Phalatse rumored to be considering contesting for the DA leadership position. That's against you, Mr. Steenhuisen. She doesn't hold a position within the DA, but she did hold the Johannesburg mayorship. What do you think?
Well, I welcome any challenger in the party. I believe fundamentally in internal democracy. Unlike parties like Action South Africa, who have not had a Congress to elect a single one of their leaders, or all self-appointed by the leader himself, who himself has not faced a Congress. I welcome a challenge from anybody in the DA. I've never shied away from the fact that I believe fundamentally in internal democracy. If she's going to enter the race, I welcome the opportunity to engage on how best we can grow the DA and how best we can go into the 2024 election.
What's your response to the assertion that the Democratic Alliance let those negotiations fail so Mpho Phalatse could get pushed out because she's out of favor?
Well, I think that's completely untrue. And if one looks at the intensity of the negotiations and the compromises that we were willing to make, I think that shows a different story altogether. We would certainly no interest in not being in power in Joburg under Mayor Mpho Phalatse, and she's had the full support of the leadership. Even when she was illegally ousted the previous time, she's had our full backing. We provided party resources, officers, staff, and salary to be able to sustain during that particular time so we could get her back into government. This is a party that has backed its candidate, that has gone into the negotiations to try and secure a deal. It's made 6 separate concessions when the Patriotic Alliance wouldn't make a single one of them. And we tried our best to secure a deal, but there's some prices that you cannot pay.
Let's talk about coalitions now. The EFF announcing they're willing to enter into government. It seems to be a statement that's a precursor to the Democratic Alliance mayor, first the Speaker, Nikuruleni, being removed, and then the mayor, and then the EFF taking over that government. A real prospect of the ANC taking over the Johannesburg government. And then in Tshwane, without Action SA, the DA would lose its majority, leaving it open to also lose that government. What do you think of the prospect of the DA being out of government in all 3 of these metros?
Well, it would be unfortunate, and I feel sorry for the citizens of that municipality to be back in the clutches of the very people who have run those municipalities into the ground over the last 2 decades. You're essentially putting the foxes back into the henhouse. And no doubt, like we saw in Nelson Mandela Bay, there will be an immediate reversal of the gains and improvements that have been made over the course of the coalition governments. I think we need to be very circumspect about how we behave in these particular situations. And I've been very clear. We want to govern, but not at all costs. And whether we're in government for 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, or 5 years, we will govern according to our values and principles, because it's those that have sustained us through the tough times and have allowed us to be able to, where we do have a majority, govern and govern effectively. So if we're pushed into opposition, we will be the best opposition we can. But I fear for the residents in those cities who will once again be thrown to the wolves.
Do you think it'll happen?
I don't know. I mean, there's a long road to go still, and obviously the coalition itself is going to have to sit and decide whether we just simply let those cities fall to the ANC, EFF, Patriotic Alliance coalitions of corruption. But, yeah, that'll be a discussion for that coalition to have.
Finally, John, we saw the Cape Independence Party showing its flags at the DA's March to Luthuli House. Are you endorsing the move for the Western Cape to secede here, or what's the relationship?
Well, let me be clear. I announced a big, generous offer to South Africa to join us on the march, whether it was other political parties, civil society bodies, and I was very glad to see people there. We don't endorse Cape independence. I've made it very clear that I think that the fight that we should be working towards is to greater federalization of powers and a devolution of power to competent provincial and local government, and that has been very clearly the DA's position. There were a number of civil society bodies and agricultural organizations that joined the march, and that are including ordinary South Africans who just came to join up. I'm very glad. And as I've said repeatedly, it doesn't matter what political party you're from, what civil body you're on, what church body you're on, South Africans need to take to the streets to peacefully demonstrate to the government that we're not going to simply take this load shedding and the premium of corruption of 18.65% that we're being expected to pay.
Thank you so much. That's the DA's leader, John Steenhuisen, speaking to us on the sidelines of the DA's Free State Conference. On the podium right now is Helen Zille, the party's federal chairperson, and we'll rush down there to try and have a listen to what she has to say. Most certainly, we'd expect to get some comments on the recent developments in the metros, but the DA holding firm on its position and holding firm on its support for the ousted mayor of Johannesburg, Dr. Mpho Phalatse. It's back to you, Ayanda.
Govan, Whittles, thanks very much indeed. We'll get you an opportunity to go listen to Helen Zille. Govan is live to us there from Kroonstad in the